Hey everyone, so many of you have reached out with questions about bird flu and what it could mean for your cats.
It's definitely a hot topic right now, and understandably so.
Well, we're going to take a deep dive into it today.
That's right, we've got a mix of news reports, expert opinions.
We've even got some surprising stuff about raw milk, of all things.
Yeah, you don't hear those two in the same sentence very often.
Hopefully by the end of this, you'll know exactly what's going on and how to keep your furry friends safe.
Definitely. It's all about understanding the connections, between birds, cats, even humans to really get the full picture.
So let's start with the basics. Bird flu or avian influenza? I know it mostly affects birds, but what exactly is it?
Okay, so the specific strain we're focused on here is H5N1.
H5N1?
It's a type of influenza virus that can be, well, pretty nasty.
Okay, and this one can actually spread to other animals,
Unfortunately, it can.
like our cats?
Including our beloved felines, yeah. And even us humans.
Humans too. I'll admit, I didn't realize it could jump species like that.
It can. It's not something to take lightly. Human cases are still relatively rare, but the severity of H5N1 is a legitimate concern.
I can see why people are worried. Has anyone gotten sick in the U.S.?
There has already been at least one human death in the U.S. linked to this strain.
Wow, that's definitely alarming. So how are cats getting infected? I mean, my cat's an indoor cat. She doesn't really hang out with birds that much.
You'd be surprised. There are actually a few ways cats can get infected.
Uh,
The most direct route is through contact with infected birds.
So like if they catch a bird.
Exactly, like catching and eating a wild bird that carries the virus. But they can also pick it up from contaminated environments like water sources, food bowls, even their litter box if it's been exposed to bird droppings.
That makes sense. So even if they're not hunting birds, they could still get it.
Right, exactly.
So indoor cats are probably less at risk then.
Indoor cats are definitely at a lower risk, yeah. Simply because their exposure to potential sources of infection is limited.
Okay, good. I remember Dr. Finnick from the veterinary channel, she was saying something about that, urging cat owners to be super careful about letting their cats roam free right now because of bird flu.
Absolutely. Keeping your cat indoors is one of the best ways to protect them. But there's another risk factor we need to talk about.
Oh, what's that?
Raw food diets.
Ah, yes, raw food. I've seen all the hype about it lately. I mean, is there really a connection to bird flu?
There is, and it's a significant one. Remember how we were saying cats can get infected by eating contaminated birds?
Right.
Well, that extends to raw meat as well, including commercial raw pet food.
So that raw chicken or turkey could be contaminated.
If that meat comes from an infected animal, it can transmit the virus.
That's scary. I've never really thought about the potential risks of feeding raw meat.
It's definitely something to consider, especially with bird flu circulating.
So what are we supposed to look for? What are the signs of bird flu in a cat?
Okay, so one of the first things you might notice is a loss of appetite.
So they just stop eating,
Infected cats often lose their appetite completely,
even for their favorite treats.
even for their favorite treats. Lethargy and unusual tiredness are also common signs. They might be sleeping much more than usual or just seem weak and uncoordinated.
My cat is usually a little ball of energy, so that would definitely stand out to me.
Exactly. You also want to pay attention to their breathing.
They're breathing?
Difficulty breathing or rapid breathing, especially if they're breathing through their mouth, wheezing or coughing,
Okay.
could be a sign of trouble.
So loss of appetite, lethargy, breathing problems. Those are all pretty clear signs. Anything else we should be on the lookout for?
Keep an eye out for any neurological symptoms, like
Mhm.
wobbling, disorientation, difficulty walking, head tilting, or even seizures.
Seizures, wow.
Bird flu can affect the nervous system.
So those signs could indicate a more serious infection.
Exactly.
This is all really important information. I'm going to be extra vigilant with my cat from now on.
That's the right approach. It's always better to err on the side of caution, especially when it comes to something as potentially serious as H5N1.
Definitely. So we've talked about how cats can get infected, the symptoms to watch out for.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that humans can get infected too. What does that look like?
The symptoms in humans are pretty similar to what we see in cats. Fever, cough, runny nose, sneezing, body aches.
Okay. Sounds like the flu.
It does. But in severe cases, it can lead to pneumonia and other serious complications, just like in cats.
So this is definitely sounding like a multi-species concern. And to make things even more complicated, there's this whole situation with the new administration and their decision to restrict communication from health agencies.
Yes, including the CDC.
Right. It seems like that could be a big problem.
This is where things get really concerning, especially for veterinarians and hospital staff.
How so?
The lack of clear and current information coming from the CDC is creating a dangerous situation for those on the front lines of dealing with potential bird flu cases.
So how is this information blackout affecting those who need it the most?
Imagine you're a veterinarian and you suspect a cat might have bird flu. You need to know what the latest recommendations are for testing,
Right.
treatment, and even protecting yourself and your staff from potential infection.
Of course you don't want to get it yourself.
But with the CDC being silenced, that vital information is simply not getting through.
That's incredibly worrying. So what can we do about this? Should we avoid raw milk, even if it's not for our cats?
That's a great question.
And what about commercially prepared raw cat food?
Yeah.
Are there any brands that are safe?
Those are all excellent questions, and we'll unpack those details right after a quick break. Stay tuned.
So before the break, we were talking about raw milk and commercially prepared raw cat food
Right.
and how that could be connected to the bird flu.
Yeah.
I'm still a little fuzzy on how it all fits together.
Okay, so we know that this H5N1, the specific strain of bird flu, can spread to mammals,
Okay.
including cows. Yeah, so if a dairy cow gets infected, it can shed the virus in its milk. Now, pasteurization, the process of heating the milk to kill bacteria, also effectively neutralizes the bird flu virus.
Oh.
But raw milk, which hasn't been pasteurized, can still carry the virus.
So that's where the risk comes in.
Exactly, posing a risk to anyone who consumes it or even comes into contact with it.
So even if we aren't feeding raw milk to our cats directly, it's still something to be mindful of. It's
Exactly.
our own health.
The CDC has been very vocal about the risks associated with raw milk, especially during a bird flu outbreak.
Okay.
And remember, commercially prepared raw pet food can also contain unpasteurized dairy products,
Oh, wow. Okay.
which increases the risk for cats as well.
So it's not just the meat itself, it's also the other ingredients
Exactly.
that could be contaminated. So pasteurization is key,
Absolutely.
both for us and for our cats.
Yeah, it's really the safest option. But let's circle back to this information blackout coming from the administration.
Right, that's a big concern.
It's alarming to think that essential information about this potential bird flu threat is being suppressed.
Yeah, it's frustrating because it feels like they're putting politics ahead of public health,
Right.
and that's putting everyone at risk.
Yeah.
How is this lack of communication affecting those on the front lines?
Well, imagine you're a veterinarian treating a cat with suspicious symptoms. You need to know if there have been any recent outbreaks in your area, what the latest testing protocols are, how to best protect yourself and your staff.
Right, so you don't get it yourself.
Exactly. But with the CDC being muzzled, getting that information becomes incredibly difficult.
It's a scary thought because veterinarians and hospital staff, they're dealing with these potential cases directly.
They are, yeah.
They need to have access to the most up-to-date information to do their job safely and effectively.
It's a classic case of knowledge is power. And right now, those who need that power the most are being kept in the dark.
It's a recipe for disaster, not just for them, but for the public as well. And it's not just bird flu. This administration's approach to science and public health is really concerning.
Yeah.
It feels like they're more interested in silencing experts and downplaying risks than in protecting people.
It's definitely a worrying trend. And it's important for us to understand that this isn't just an abstract political issue. It has real-world consequences, especially when it comes to our health and the health of our pets.
This deep dive has definitely taken us down some unexpected paths.
It has.
We started with bird flu and our cats, and now we're talking about the politicization of science and the importance of reliable information.
It's all connected, and it's a reminder that we can't just passively consume information. We need to critically evaluate it, question it, and demand transparency from those in power.
So given everything we've learned, what are the most important takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
First and foremost, awareness is key. Understand the risks of bird flu, both for your cat and for yourself.
Right.
Know the symptoms to watch for, and be vigilant, especially if your cat goes outdoors.
And remember, even though indoor cats are at a lower risk, they can still be exposed through contaminated food or environments.
Right.
So choose commercially cooked cat food and practice good hygiene, like regularly cleaning food and water bowls and litter boxes.
Exactly. And if you do notice any concerning symptoms in your cat, don't hesitate to contact your veterinarian. Early detection and treatment are crucial for a positive outcome.
So we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there's one more thing we need to address before we wrap up.
Okay.
What can we do to advocate for better policies and practices that prioritize public health and ensure that those on the front lines have the information they need to protect themselves and others?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore right after this short break. Stay tuned.
So we were talking about advocating for better policies and practices, making sure everyone stays safe and informed, especially during a potential bird flu outbreak.
Mm.
What can our listeners do to help?
Well, it all starts with being informed and engaged. We can't just sit back and assume that someone else will take care of it. We need to be proactive and use our voices to demand better.
So where do we start? I mean, most of us aren't scientists or politicians. What can we actually do to make a difference?
You'd be surprised how much power everyday citizens have. One of the most effective things you can do is contact your elected officials.
Really?
Let them know that you're concerned about this information blackout and that you support policies that prioritize transparency and science-based decision-making when it comes to public health.
That's a good point. It's easy to feel powerless in these situations, but our elected officials are supposed to represent us.
Right.
We need to hold them accountable and make our voices heard.
Exactly. And you can also support organizations that are fighting to protect public health.
Okay.
Groups like the CDC Foundation, the American Public Health Association, and the Center for Science and the Public Interest are all doing incredible work in this area.
I've heard of those groups. Donating to them is a great way to support their efforts, right?
Absolutely. Even a small donation can make a difference. And don't underestimate the power of social media.
Oh, yeah?
Sharing accurate information, calling out misinformation, and engaging in constructive dialogue can help to shape public opinion and influence policy decisions.
Social media get a bad rap sometimes,
It does.
but it can be a powerful tool for raising awareness and mobilizing people around important issues.
It definitely can. It's all about using it responsibly and strategically.
Right.
Remember, change doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
It takes time, persistence, and a willingness to keep pushing for what's right.
Well, this has been a real eye-opener.
It has.
We started with bird flu and our cats, and now we're talking about advocating for change and the power of collective action.
It all comes back to that interconnectedness.
Right.
What affects one species can ultimately affect us all. And it's up to each of us to do our part to protect the health and well-being of our communities and our planet.
Well said. So, to sum it all up, we've learned about the risks of bird flu to both animals and humans, the importance of being vigilant and taking preventative measures, and, this alarming trend of suppressing vital health information.
Right.
We've also explored the power of individual and collective action, how we can advocate for better policies and practices that prioritize public health.
Absolutely.
It's been a fascinating and at times concerning journey, but ultimately we hope that our listeners feel more informed, empowered, and engaged as a result.
Knowledge is power. And by sharing this information and encouraging open dialogue, we can create a safer and healthier world for everyone, including our beloved feline companions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to continue exploring these issues, stay informed, and use your voice to advocate for positive change. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay safe.